aggregate demand and supply today. I hope you're ready to learn.
Oh yeah.
What we're going to be talking about today is aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is the function that relates price level and the amount of output that a nation demands in a given period of time. Aggregate demand aggregates all of the consumer's demands for all goods and services produced in a nation in a given time period at different price levels. There is an inverse relationship between the quantity of real output demanded and the price level, which means if price level increases, real output is going to decrease. So, aggregate demand measures the demand for a nation's output of goods and services in a year, or its GDP. And unlike normal demand, it measures the GDP, while normal demand just measures the individual consumption for 1 year, while aggregate demand puts a sum total. Okay, so aggregate demand for a nation's output consists of 4 distinct types of spending. The first one is the letter C, which stands for consumption. Consumption includes all the spending by domestic households on goods and services. The next one is I, which represents investment. Investment measures the total spending by firms on capital equipment and by households on real estate or homes. So this is anything that they put money into that will continue to make money. That is what an investment is. The next letter is G, which stands for government spending. This measures a country's government's expenditures on goods and services. The next one is net exports, which is exports minus imports. This is the last of the categories. It measures the total income earned from the sale of exports to foreigners minus the total amount spent by the nation's households, firms, and government on goods and services imported from other countries. Alright, so for our purposes today, we are going to be talking about the aggregate demand portion of this graph, which is the part where it shows the relationship between price level and quantity. But for right now, we're just going to be looking at the aggregate demand part, which is a downward sloping curve for 3 reasons. The first being the wealth effect, the second being the interest rate effect, and the next being the net export effect. We will go into detail of those later on in this video, but for right now, just know that this is downward sloping for those 3 causes. Alright, so as you can see, if you were to change the price level, which is the y-axis right here, as you move price level up, it will just move the point along the curve. So it will not actually shift the aggregate demand curve, it'll just move the point along the curve, so it will not affect GDPR unless there is a shift of the aggregate demand curve. Alright, so the first explanation for why there is an inverse relationship between price level and GDPR, which is the real national output of the country, is because of the wealth effect. We're going to be talking about this right now, and the wealth effect basically says that at higher price levels, the purchasing power of that money, like wealth and savings, is going to be less, so you're not going to have as much real money to spend on those goods. So that basically means at higher price levels that consumers are going to demand less of that. That is why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. So the second reason why there is an inverse relationship between price level and national output, GDPR, is the interest rate effect. The interest rate effect basically says at higher price levels, the banks are going to raise interest rates that they are lending out to consumers, households, or firms, so those are going to be less attractive. They're not going to want to borrow as much from the banks anymore at those higher interest rates, which is why the demand for that goes down, which is why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. Alright, so to display the determinants of aggregate demand, we are going to show it on this graph right here. So the equation to find out the GDPR for the nation in a given period of time is C plus I plus G plus XN, which is consumer spending, investment, government spending, and exports minus imports to get you XN, which is the total. So basically, an increase in any of these factors, determinants, will increase aggregate demand. So let's say there's an increase in consumer spending, aggregate demand is going to move to the right, as you can see. So it'll move here, and then it'll shift to the right, and that means that the new equilibrium point will be right here, so then the price level will increase and quantity will stay the same because that is the set point at which the country will produce its goods. And then also, we could do it the opposite way. If we were to decrease government spending, let's say we decrease government spending, that is going to, let's just show this, decrease G is going to decrease aggregate demand. So aggregate demand is going to now shift to the left. And when aggregate demand shifts to the left, price level will decrease and quantity produced will also decrease following that. And then that also means that GDPR of the nation will decrease as well. And then it is vice versa for the rest of these determinants. If one of these increases, then aggregate demand will increase, GDPR will increase, and then if any of these decrease, then the GDPR will decrease as well. Hope you learned something.
Hey guys, so I'm going to talk to you guys about aggregate supply in the short run. So aggregate supply is the total amount of goods and services that all the firms and all the industries in the country will produce at a given level in a given period of time. So this illustrates the relationship between the average price level and the total output of the nation's producers. So now I'm going to talk So now we're going to talk about the aggregate supply in the long run. So this represents the level of output of a nation's producers in response to a change in the price level in a period of time, over which wages and other costs of production are flexible. So we're going to talk about the LRAS curve that is vertical at full employment and level of output, and we're going to explain that later in the graph. I'm going to talk to you guys about the determinants of aggregate supply, which is the cost of resources, actions of government, and production. And we'll show you the shifts of that later on the graph. Alright, so now I'm going to talk to you guys about the determinants of aggregate supply and sticky wages. So if wages rise due to any of the following factors, the curve will shift to the left and aggregate supply will decrease, causing higher minimum wage, stronger labor unions, and a decrease in the size of labor force. In the long run, workers will demand higher wages in response to an increase in aggregate demand and inflation.
Smile.
Hey guys, so now I'm going to show you guys the determinants of aggregate supply. So if a price of resources increase, then the supply of the good would decrease because it costs more to produce that good. So yeah. Increase in taxes paid by business to government will cause the curve to shift to the left, and an increase in energy costs due to higher oil or gas prices will reduce the level of SRAS, shifting the curve to the left. In the long run, output will return to its full employment level, wages and other prices adjust to the level of demand in the economy.
Action.
Alright. So this illustrates the idea that once this labor market has settled into equilibrium, there's a quantity of goods that society will produce that is dependent of the price level.
For yourself now.
This is definitely going to be. Alright, you still recording? Hey!
Hey, I'm looking at. Hey, I'm looking
Go!
Hey!